Welcome to Influence, the show about one of the university's founding colleges, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. I'm your host, Emily Shaw. On today's episode, we'll be focusing on the graduate program in Human Development and Family Science, and our first guest is Dr. Tommy Phillips, an associate professor in the School of Human Sciences, which houses the Human Development and Family Science program. Welcome, Dr. Phillips.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you here. Can you tell us about the HDFS program?
Yes, we offer both master's and doctoral degrees in Human Development and Family Science. The program's relatively new. The master's program kicked off in fall of 2012, and then the PhD program kicked off a year later in the fall of 2013. So far, we have awarded 19 master's degrees, one PhD degree. We're about to award another PhD this semester. The master's program is 31 hours. There's both a thesis and a non-thesis track. If you take the thesis track, then obviously you're more focused on research. Non-thesis track, you would do an oral comprehensive exam at the end of the process. The master's program is more focused on producing practitioners, while the PhD program is more focused on preparing individuals for careers in academia and research. The master's program is 31 hours. The PhD program is 60 hours and requires a dissertation. At present, we have about 32 graduate students, about twice as many PhD students as master's students. And that's just because we can get the master's students through the program much quicker. With the PhD, it takes much more time.
Makes sense. And they have focus areas they can choose from. Can you tell us about those?
Yes, at present, students can specialize in infant and child development, youth development, family science, family resource management, and gerontology.
That's excellent. So though new, it sounds like it has a really good momentum and that it's making some great progress.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned research, and I know that's a really big focus for you. So can you tell us about your research, or maybe how you start choosing a topic for research?
Yeah. You know, some faculty operate according to sort of a big research agenda, and that's just not me. That's not my personal style. Other than the fact that all of my research sort of falls under the heading human well-being, I'm not guided by any sort of larger research agenda. Research ideas come to me in various ways. Sometimes I'm reading journal articles, and as I'm looking through the literature, I'll spot a gap in the literature or some unanswered question. Other times, topics just present themselves to me in pretty unexpected ways. For instance, I just concluded a study on extracurricular activities available to students attending high schools in low-resource communities. And that topic, I mean, I never had any interest in that topic, but one day, for whatever reason, I was looking at the website for an affluent high school in Alabama. And they had a link for student clubs and organizations, and I clicked on that, and I was blown away by the sheer number of student clubs and activities they had available. There was literally something for every kid's interest. And then I got on the website for a high school in a community here in Mississippi, and I knew this was a very low-resource community. And the only extracurricular activities they had available were basically band and sports. And if you weren't a musician or weren't interested in sports, then you were sort of left out in terms of extracurricular activities. So anyway, that got me thinking, okay, is there something bigger? You know, is this a trend, you know, between affluent school districts and less affluent school districts? And so that's where the idea for that study came from. In another instance of topics presenting themselves to me in unexpected ways, I had students in one of my classes participate in an online discussion describing the most challenging or stressful situation they ever faced and how they got through it. And as I was looking at their responses, I'm like, oh, this is good stuff here, you know. And so I ended up conducting a larger study of that.
Excellent.
And then finally, when I was employed at another university, I gave my students an extracurricular activity, an extra credit activity, excuse me, to go out and find couples who'd been married 7 years and to ask them, you know, what are the secrets to your marital success?
That's neat.
And so when I got their responses back, my African-American students, they turned in responses indicating they had interviewed African-American couples who had been married for ages. And based on what I had studied in the research literature on African-American marriages, I didn't expect to see that because generally the research literature paints a pretty dismal portrait of African-American marriages. It basically says either they're less likely to get married, when they do get married, they're more likely to divorce. So it just paints a very bad prognosis for African-American marriages. So anyway, to sort of wrap this story up, that led to me and my colleague, Dr. Joe Wilmoth, conducting a study of enduring African American marriages, and the results of that study have been published.
That's excellent.
So,
I know you've also similarly studied family structure and family process, and if you could kind of quickly tell us what that looks like.
yeah, that was based upon a survey of 320 kids in rural Alabama, a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, and then the mountains of eastern Kentucky. And basically I was looking to see, when it comes to adolescent well-being, which matters more, family structure, in other words, who makes up the family,
Right.
or family process, what goes on in the family.
Right.
And my findings clearly indicate that between the two, family process matters more. So really, what goes on in the family matters more than who's in the family.
That's interesting.
So family process is the more important of the two.
Of the two. All right. Well, that's very interesting to hear, and we thank you for joining us on Influence. When we come back, we'll hear from a PhD candidate and hear about his research.
You know the scene in those popular TV crime shows when the investigators show up? The one where they scratch their heads while trying to figure out who committed the homicide and when? At Mississippi State University, we're solving mysteries behind real-life crime scenes with forensic research that's a first of its kind. Teaming with microbiologists from around the country, we're examining microscopic bacteria that can help solve real murders. So far, our partnership with a major metropolitan medical examiner is yielding results with more than 200 real-life crime samples analyzed. We're learning how microbiomes change and relocate, uncovering evidence in criminal investigations by better pinpointing time of death. Way more exciting than being a TV detective. We're finding crucial answers when they're needed most. Solving mysteries with science, that's worth watching. It's hard to fathom. By the year 2050, Earth will be home to 3 billion more people than today. And with rising populations and dwindling resources, one of the most pressing questions is a stark one. How will we feed everyone? At Mississippi State University, we're preparing a meal table where there's a seat for all of us. As one of the nation's leading research universities, our scientists are deploying technology to enhance crop production, developing vaccines to protect aquaculture, working to boost water resources here at home and in communities around the globe. And by partnering with the League of International Universities and the United Nations, we're guaranteeing that global food security is a priority for years to come. As our world grows, so do the challenges. But when it comes to how we will feed everyone, rest assured, Mississippi State has all options on the table.
Welcome back to Influence, where our topic today is the graduate program in Human Development and Family Science. Our next guest is our PhD candidate, Josh Turner. Josh, thanks for being here today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We're excited. Tell me a little bit about your background, how you got to HDFS.
Well, it's kind of an indirect background, I guess.
Okay.
My academic background's actually in sociology.
Okay.
I have an undergrad in sociology from Wayne State College in Nebraska, and my master's degree is in rural sociology from South Dakota State University. And I've been an employee at Mississippi State for 9 years at NSPARC. And the way that I got into the HDFS field is it was actually through work.
Okay.
And our research center was contracted by the Mississippi Department of Health and Human Services to conduct a needs assessment of older adults in Mississippi. And so that required a lot of survey research and focus groups and a lot of background research on the older adult population, not only in the state but nationwide and internationally. So from there, I kind of developed my interest in research on older adults and gerontology. And as luck would have it, I learned through that work that there was a gerontology graduate certificate program. And so I started that program, which was a 15-hour, 5-class program. And once I got that completed, the PhD program in Human Development and Family Studies began, and I was actually one of the first students in the I'm a member of the first PhD cohort
That's
in that
excellent.
program, which has an emphasis in gerontology. So I was able to kind of just carry on towards a terminal degree.
That is excellent. The right place at the right time,
Right.
if you will.
Mhm.
So your dissertation also focuses on older adults. Would you tell us about that?
Right. My dissertation focuses on food insecurity and food access for older adults. And what I've focused on is I've focused on non-metropolitan areas and how the characteristics of those areas in terms of like their socioeconomic status and their demographic characteristics, how that influences or affects or impacts food access for older adults. So it's a highly statistical study, but my goal is to use the initial analysis to develop interventions that will eventually be designed to help address the low food access situation for older adults in rural areas.
Excellent. There was a focus on transportation, I believe, also.
Right. So I was also through the work with other colleagues, able to secure some grant funding a few years ago with an organization on campus that focuses on the area of transportation and a lot of different areas of transportation, whether it be the economics of it, or what we focus on is the service side.
Okay.
What I'm really interested in is service need among older adults, because when people get older, driving becomes more of a problem,
Right.
and that can affect everything. It can affect access to food if they live, far enough away. Their mobility is an issue. It could affect their ability to make sure that they stick to proper nutrition plans and things like that. So I recently was able to, along with some of my colleagues, publish a paper on the transportation needs of older adults, and that was a nationwide study that
Excellent.
we were able to conduct, and we just got the word that our paper was accepted probably a month ago.
Excellent.
So now we're going through the process of proofreading and finalizing that.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today. And thank you for joining us on Influence, where we discuss the graduate program in Human Development and Family Science. We'll see you next time.